So let's speculate a bit. Next 3, 6, 12 months, where does this go? Where do you see this going? Like, is it in 12 months from now, I will just go to my Google Docs and I'll use Bard, or I don't even care if it's Bard or OpenAI or a plugin or an API. I just kind of got used to these various new cool things I can do. Or, where do you see this going in the next 3 to 6, 12 months?
There's kind of like two scenarios that I see playing out here, and I'm not sure, I haven't made up my mind which of those two scenarios will be the most likely yet. Just because the space is so rapidly changing and there's a lot of new stuff coming out. Basically, I can tell you about my two kind of like options that I see. Option one is the option where the main beneficiary of this technology would actually be large corporations, which are already jumping in this technology very quickly, like companies like Microsoft, Google, Adobe, Duolingo. They're also, for example, integrating large language models. All of those companies are jumping on board, and they'll be able to quickly integrate them into their products. And basically having this capacity, at least a basic version, will become the norm. And when this happens, this will basically put out of business many of those startups that are just calling those APIs and trying to do the same, especially if they're in direct competition with what some of those big companies are already doing. It's going to be very difficult for them to compete because, let's say I'm a big company and I'm already using the Microsoft suite. I already am using Teams, Microsoft Office. There's no chance for me to pay an extra $50 for writing assistant when everything is already integrated into Microsoft or in Google. So that's one scenario that I see, and there the success of the smaller companies will be the ones that are really, really narrow niche use cases where the interest from the big companies is going to be much less prominent. I think there's opportunity there for sure for this to happen. So we might see a couple of pretty big companies like that show up that are either targeting very, very narrow specific areas. Let's say, I don't know, let's say healthcare in a specific use case. Let's say, I don't know, summarizing clinical notes or something like that, where big company like Google or Microsoft doesn't have interest jumping in. And there might be some interesting new companies getting bigger and bigger, which also need to be very fast. They need to iterate, they need to collect their own proprietary data sets and potentially also come up with new technology, not just rely on APIs, because there's going to be other similar companies coming up which will want to do the same. And another class of companies in this scenario, one that will be successful most likely is at least on the short term, will be the foundation language model companies. Right now, I think there's a lot of interest in just using them as they are. But on the long term, I actually think that they will be less prominent, especially as people realize that ultimately, if you want to like have an edge, you need to have your own foundation language model. You need to fine tune it on your own data set that you collect from your users. And this is the value. Many of those companies that are now integrating APIs as they are out of the box will switch to looking into developing more and more of their own custom tech in the next 36 to 12 months, as many of the startups, many of their competitors start to do the same. This will be becoming the edge. And then scenario two would be this will be scenario one, where basically big tech foundation model companies will be making money, will be successful from this, but foundation models might lose power over time potentially unless they're able to keep up. They're able to come up with new models, because also there'll be pressure from open source, which is going to basically replicate what foundation models are doing, and it will be more and more easier to basically, you wouldn't have to rely on API, but you could just download a model from Hugging Face and use that one. So that would be scenario one. And of course, companies like NVIDIA will be profiting at the end of the day, or like companies which are more fundamental to the whole ecosystem. No matter what, they're going to be beneficial. They're going to benefit from the developments. Scenario two would be a little bit more optimistic towards the startups, because this technology is really revolutionary at the end of the day, at least what you can do with it. So there might be some potential really novel use cases that are basically potentially not putting out big companies out of business, but potentially creating new industries. which are completely different from what the big companies are doing. Here, for example, could come in like search or assistants. We might see some really innovative assistants coming out. Right now, our current assistants are pretty bad, like Siri and Google Assistant. They're not really good. So perhaps integrating advanced LLM technology, like also multimodal technology, let's say images, videos, dialogue, and building something really new that is completely different from what the big companies are doing at the moment could allow some companies, some startups to be getting an edge, which might actually give them an advantage because of their speed. They're building completely new products. It might create some new big companies out of this situation, rather than just the big companies benefiting from the situation, and then basically they provide this technology to the users, and the users are so those are kind of the two scenarios that I'm seeing. Either big companies are benefiting, or basically the users are benefiting, and everyone is getting this technology for free sooner or later. So everyone is going to get ChatGPT-like functionality for free within Google Docs, within Microsoft. Nobody is going to pay for custom software because everything is kind of covered already by those big companies. Or we might see even more innovation. So it could be that I'm kind of like short-sighted with the scenario one, and basically I'm underestimating what can be achieved in terms of innovation, in terms of new products, because the field is changing. Is changing a lot every day. We're seeing new models coming out every day, multimodal models that can do more and more, better aligned. So who knows? We have to see what happens.